As far as I believe, we only get one shot. Why not go for it, And the fear is there. Sometimes it's crippling. You understand the entrepreneurial struggle. It sounds good on the podcast. It sounds good when you're interviewed. I know what it's like to have worked 50 hours a week and be broke, but I have to eat, or I have to pay the electricity bill or my car insurance bill. That's the journey that every entrepreneur can relate to. Hopefully it never got that bad for you. I'm just speaking.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to do yourself one teeny tiny little favor and make sure to give us a follow, because I don't want you to miss out on any of the amazing guests I got coming on this year. Without further ado, let's get right into this one. I got a very special guest that I met at a conference last year called Podcast Movement. It was my first time attending that conference, so I really didn't know what to expect. And if I'm not mistaken, we were at the end of the ending networking party that they were doing, and we bumped into each other and had a good conversation. And since then, we've been in touch on IG.
Right.
And then you reached out to hop on the show, and I was like, let's do it. And now we're here. And so let me make sure I get this right. I should have asked this before we hit live, but Kwadwo, right?
Kwadwo with a J.
Joe.
Yeah.
Almost had it. Sheesh.
But don't worry, look at my name. I mean, nobody's going to pronounce that unless you're from Ghana, where my name is from.
Edit this part out and live. All right, Kwadwo. So I'm glad that you're here on the show today. And for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to get to meet you, to get to know you yet, man, tell us your elevator pitch, man. Who are you and what do you do?
Okay, well, simply, I am a Facebook ads manager, which I serve people in the online space, mainly course creators, helping them scale up from, let's say, low six figures to high six figures. Low being like 200K annual revenue, high being 900K annual revenue. And who am I? Well, I live down here in Mexico with my wife and my two kids, and we've been here for 3 years. Before then, we were in China for 12 years. So I guess I'm a man of the world. I love traveling. I love speaking foreign languages. And most of all, I love connecting with people.
Amazing. That's why we're here today. And one quick nugget before we actually get into the podcast. I love how you just said low six figures, as if six figures is a low number, because a lot of people that are not in the business space are still haven't gotten numb to these numbers yet. And for me, I hear it and it's wow, that's amazing. And I know to a lot of people it's six figures is crazy high. I never even seen anyone in six figures. So it's so funny how perspective, man. It's just, everything is relative. I love it, man. I love it. And so let's get.
No, I was just gonna say it's a small world, and definitely a unique niche that we're in, right? Where people just throw around the word six figures, low and high, like normal. You meet people and you immediately start talking about how much you make, that's normal, And it's,
That's why I love the business space so much, man, because it's so much more normalized. When you're especially in a digital entrepreneur space, at least from the people I've been able to come across, it's so much more normalized talking about money and throwing out revenue numbers and stuff like that. And it's growing up, you never heard anyone talk about money. It's it's crazy how the people who have the money are just so comfortable talking about money with other people who are money oriented, right? And it's always makes for great conversation. But Kwadwo, take us back in a time machine a little bit, man. What was little Kwadwo when you were first growing up? Where did this story all begin?
You were supposed to prepare me for that question. How little do you mean little? First of all,
where does the story begin, man? As far back as you want to take us.
All right. Well, a little snapshot then. So I grew up on the West Coast, kind of by Seattle, Northwest, in a city called Tacoma. If you ask about little Kwadwo, well, little Kwadwo grew up. Yeah, I grew up in the hood, even though I don't sound like it. So my dad immigrated from Ghana, right? And my mom is from Missouri. And basically, they raised me. I wasn't allowed to leave the block, and I don't think I had any friends on the other side of the street from me for the first 10, 11 years of my life. I think the furthest I could go was 2 houses down the street. So that's kind of the area I grew up in. And my dad being an immigrant from Ghana, 2 jobs, day job, swing shift, working all the time. My mom cleaned house, and that's kind of how I grew up. And so a lot that went into the person I am now is right before I went to university, I just kind of got turned on to foreign languages, and then did something pretty out of the norm that my parents hated. But son of an immigrant, he wanted me to be a doctor. So I kind of did not want to do that. went the physics route to make him happy. And then I just straight up and went to France and started working. And that kind of sparked the travel bug in me. And I realized like I got a gift for languages and I love communicating with people. And so fast forward to now, like basically I got married and tricked my wife into going to China for 12 years. And we took a vacation right in January 13th, 2020. And so everybody knows what happened then. I won't say the names just in case like this is going out on social media because we know like some platforms dial down the reach when you say stuff like that. But at any rate, so we're in Mexico vacationing, like, and then we have to start quarantining. Um, and then we're happy to quarantine because, tacos and guacamole and all this good stuff. And then we find out like 5 months later that China is going to shut down their borders, because of this wonderful thing that's running around the world. And we ended up being stuck outside of our house in China. So 12-year home in China, imagine never planning to leave. And we went on vacation with one check-in luggage, two kids, and a couple of carry-ons. And so that's how I live in Mexico now. And that was about 4 years ago. Wow. Yeah, 4 years ago already. So yeah, that's kind of me. Not your typical behind the screen Facebook ads manager who just loves to like crunch numbers with no emotions, like actually I'm super people person. Like I think that's why you and I clicked. I was super impressed when I think that Chinese lady introduced me
Yeah.
to you and I was like, this guy, if I had my stuff together like he does at his age, like I could have took over the world by now. So like
Yeah, I love. Yeah, thanks, man. It really does mean a lot. And I want to ask you a couple things because I'm also a child of immigrants, right? And so it's
yeah.
like for whatever reason, like the college degree, the university degree is like the pinnacle of like American success. Like that, not even just American success, just success in general. I feel like for like immigrant families from all over, regardless of where they immigrated from. And
Mm,
so I also went against, my grandparents. Like for me, I was the golden child. I was the one. Pretty much all my cousins from my grandparents that I live with. Right, there's like maybe like 15 of us in total, and like all of them stayed back. So it's like I was the only one who had amazing grades in school. Like I never stayed back. I got into a bunch of colleges, and so like they were like, "Oh, John's gonna be the first one to graduate college. Like he's gonna do it." And so I was like I guess the ray of hope almost, like to make the Mendez family proud. And then when for me pandemic happened, so I didn't get locked out of China, but I dropped out of college in the middle of the pandemic,
oh
and so it's like
no. Okay.
yeah, and so I dropped out midway. It was my sophomore year, and I left university. Didn't talk to anyone about it, and going into it, I made sure not to need any help from my grandparents or anyone in my family because
Okay.
I always knew that college was a scam going into it. And for whatever reason, like if things didn't work out, I didn't have to worry about like, oh, but I have their money in mind, or oh, but they helped me get into college. Like, 'cause a lot of people get stuck like that. It's like, oh, but my parents took out these student loans and now they feel forced to finish their 4 year degree, right? And so, like for me, I made sure no one helped me, or at least in my family, so that I could leave and not have to hear any of them say anything. But they all still had something to say. Like they all pretty
Oh, for
much
sure.
were like, oh, John, like what are you doing? Like you're crazy. And then I still did it anyway. I didn't consult with any of them because it was my decision to make and my life to live. And so I say all that to say, you going against the grain and deciding to, embark on your own journey. Like, what was that like for you, especially at that age?
It was scary but exciting. I think at that, so that first, are you talking about the first time I went abroad and kind of went on my
Yeah,
own
to
path
France. Yeah,
to
went to
France? So
France.
yeah,
Yeah, to
that
start
was
working.
scary and exciting, but I mean, I was in college, so it was more exciting than anything. Like I did a work abroad program,
Hmm.
first of all, which it wasn't even regular study abroad. It was like you fly over there, you have a 2 hour orientation, and they give you two binders. One binder is jobs that like the previous participants had like secured in Paris, and the other binder was previous like hosts, we'll call like apartments that people had lived at. And so they're like, great, this is a pretty independent program. So like, before you run out of cash, like, and you can't stay at the hostel or the hotel anymore. Like, go find a job because you have all the paperwork to get a
Yeah.
job legally in this program, and go find an apartment. And so like, I was a bit terrified because I kind of snuck in with not quite the financial means that I needed to have. Um, we'll just say that. But I was when you're doing something, maybe you don't know that you were meant to do it, but you got to follow that excitement. And so, like, at that point, I didn't know that foreign languages was really my thing. And I really loved traveling the world and meeting new people and communicating and all this. But I was just super excited, and it was a fun time.
Yeah, and then another question too I wanted to ask you because I like to travel as well. We were talking a little bit about traveling, traveling the world and stuff, and I haven't got to travel the world as much as I'd like. I've been traveling the U.S. quite a bit over the past year or so. But what's it like? What you live now? France, from what I know, China and Mexico. That's at least three completely different countries right there,
Yeah.
and the U.S. So it's like so far from all your travels and your journeys, like what are some of the biggest things that you learned, like, and how have that helped shift your perspective on life itself?
All right, I'll just keep this one simple. Uh, I learned that people are very, very different, yet at our core, like we're very the same. We're really the same. Um, so what do I mean? What do I mean by that? I mean, going to France was the first time I met people that didn't grow up around me, that didn't believe, like me growing up as a Christian, like didn't believe either the same faith or just didn't have the same cultural values, right? But at the same time, I made great friends with them. And that was the first time like I ever encountered somebody who thought differently than me, somebody who looked at my country and thought things that I didn't agree with, you know? And so how can I summarize that? Like I met this guy who was a priest. Like we're talking had dedicated already like 11 years of his life in the
Mhm.
Catholic Church. I met this other guy from Toronto who went to the University of McGill, a great university there. Don't quote me if it's not, don't fact check me. It might not be in Toronto, but like he was studying to be a rabbi. We're talking like over a decade at the age of like 19, you know? Um, cool, great friends. I met this model, pretty girl, awesome, right? And she had spent most of her life, it was Paris, modeling, you know? And so, like, of course, like, as a single guy, like, I'm gonna meet models in Paris. Um, Actually, I'll take a quick side story. So I went there, had 2 weeks to find a job, ended up partying most of the time, and then spent all the money that I didn't really have in the beginning and couldn't afford like the cheapest apartment I couldn't get. And so actually, like, then I went to these models and I was like, hey, we've been partying together. How about you let me sleep on the floor? They're like, wait, we don't know you that well. And I'm like, wait a second. And so I ended up having to leave my luggage in their apartment, and I was homeless for 2 weeks. Where I was still looking for a job, I didn't have a place to stay, and so if you know Paris, the Notre Dame, right in the center of the city, that big cathedral, there's a little cafe across from it called Shakespeare and Company, and it's like starving artist scene. So I like slept on that floor, went to parties to go home with people, not in that sense, but actually to couch surf before couch surfing existed. But yeah, you meet people around the world, and I guess at their core, I mean, there's some mean people, but I choose to assume that people are positive, people care about you, and that I believe people are worth caring about and definitely worth loving. And like, I remember in China, I was at this get together and I meet this guy, and he was from Afghanistan. And he looks at me and like he didn't think I knew where Afghanistan was. So he looks at me straight in the eye and he's like, "Your country drops bombs like on my villages or something." And I was like, "Oh." And then I just kind of put my arm around him. I was like, "Look, we're not here to be about our governments, you know. It's just like me and you, and I think you're cool, and like let's chill." And he ended up becoming a good friend, and like he's running an education business over there. So like that's kind of what has impressed me most crossing these different cultures. You know, like you meet people who are just really good people. Like they come from different spots, they had different walks in life, and it's really exciting. That's why I will convince anybody and everybody to get out there and travel, just go see and go meet and go communicate.
Yeah, no, I definitely I'm with you 100% on that. I feel so many people, especially here in the States, complain so much about what we have going on here in the States. And I think it's so like naive to think that you can understand anything about this world without ever leaving these borders in
Mhm.
the States. Like I went to when I went to DR and when I went to Guatemala, like I was living with my family out there. So we were in the
Yeah.
countryside. We were in like countryside. Like especially when I went to
Oh,
Guatemala, I'm talking like literally right out my window was like six pigs, a bunch of turkeys and chickens, like a bunch of roosters. Like I did not get a good night's sleep once. Like every morning at 5 o'clock for the whole time there was just roosters yelling, and once they start screaming, then all the other animals start screaming. And it's just like it's a very very different way of life out there, man. And it's like you learn so much, you gain so much more perspective as to like what's out there in the world, and it's not like this bubble that we live here in the states.
Yeah.
And so, well, to move on from traveling a little bit, I'm curious to figure out, because one thing you didn't mention yet, because I know you're a business owner, but you didn't mention like where along this traveling journey, how did you even get into business? I know you were working at France. Hopefully, you weren't homeless forever, right? You found a job. But like, when did this entrepreneurial bug ever kick in? Was it like early in your journey, or like something I had to rediscover? Or it's like, how did that come about?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, good noticing that I didn't mention that. I would say I didn't try being an entrepreneur until, so this will date me a bit, but there's this company called Rosetta Stone, and they
Okay.
had kiosks in the malls and in the airports. Like they taught foreign languages, and they had these like little yellow boxes and big TV screens, right? And so I worked in sales there, and that was the first time I had a job where you could put more effort in and immediately get a much bigger return. And so I stepped into business through sales. I was a mediocre salesman, but could look in the computer system and see that like there were some kiosks that were absolutely crushing it. And since I knew our commission structure, basically one day I took the day off and I drove like an hour and a half up to the kiosk that I saw like the numbers they were posting were insane. Like we're talking definitely working part-time but making more than full-time income because of their sales. And so like I knew the guy who was selling the most. I showed up during his shift and I'm like, teach me what you're doing because I need to make like what you're making. And he basically just told me sales is has nothing to do with your passion. It's just a process. And if you learn the process, then you will sell more. And I was like, give me something. I had somehow, I don't know how I knew to ask him for a book, but I did. He gave me a book. I went home and devoured it once it arrived from Amazon and in one night. And I think like my sales increased like 30%. And then from there, true entrepreneurship started when sales is still a job, right? And at least mine was. And they changed the commission game on me. And so I went from making more than full time income, like on a part time job, to really struggling, uh, even with the same numbers. And so then, like, on the job, which I don't recommend this. If you're on the job, do your work well on the job. But I was already jaded, struggling to make ends meet because they killed my commission. So I was looking on YouTube. A guy told me that I should start window cleaning, and I was like, "Let me teach myself on YouTube about window cleaning." And I think Monday I started watching YouTube videos. Wednesday I had flyers printed out, and I had already gone to the local spot to get my window cleaning gear. And that Saturday I had like my first houses contact me back so I could window clean. And so jump from sales to window cleaning. Then I got real crazy and started like doing some MLM businesses and went to China initially to do that. And then in China, I started businesses teaching English. Like plenty of people in China will teach English at a school, but I met a lady who was absolutely crushing it, running a tutoring business out of her house. So she taught me, and before I knew it, like it was good time. It was like tons of pink $100 Chinese bills and just like really organized operations tutoring out of my spot in China. I mean, I've done so many different things. Like I
Yeah.
made an app to learn languages. I was selling oil paintings where like wedding photographers in the U.S. could like send a picture, and then I would take it to this little Chinese neighborhood in the city I lived in, and the local painters would just do up these beautiful oil paintings, and then I would ship it back to the states and many things, which brought me eventually to an online business teaching Chinese to people who were learning Chinese in China. And then that all fell apart during the pandemic, and I started doing Facebook ads and coaching people in the online course space. How's
Wow.
that?
Quite a bit, man. Quite a bit. But one thing I noticed, there's a recurring theme that you've been kind of bringing up throughout this whole conversation so far. And the recurring theme is you're you just go. You sound like a very much a ready fire aim guy. And I could tell because I'm a ready fire aim guy. I never aim. I'm only ready and fire. I'm always
Right?
shooting. I get an ideas and I go. Like one time I'm pretty sure you probably are familiar with the book called Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so like literally in page 6 or like page 7 of the book, it said like I'm reading the book for the very first time. I got the book, ordered it, and it was like do a virtual summit. I'm like, bro, I have a podcast. I already know speakers. Like I closed the book. I ain't touched the book for another like 3 months after that. I read that line, closed the book up, did a virtual summit. It flopped, but I did it. And so it's like I get an idea and I just go all into it. And so it's like with you going to France, with you, starting your business, like when you, well, all of those businesses, like you just got an idea and you just kind of ran with it essentially and didn't really have anything. For example, like even with the commission structure thing, you looked up like, okay, who's the top guy? Let me go to it. And I think most cases, like no matter what industry you're in, you can usually tell, even if you have a job, like if you just look, you can see who's doing the best. It's not hard to tell. You can probably tell by how they walk in the office if you're at a job or, if you're at a sales job, you could probably tell who the top guy is or top gal
Yeah.
is. And so it's like, most people don't do what you did though. Most people don't seek the answers. Most people don't have the curiosity. Like so like where does that stem from? Like how did you get that? Where did you get that from? Where do you think at least it comes from? Because you went out of your way an hour and a half to go talk to some guy, not knowing if he would actually talk back or, give you some attitude or actually give you game. You're just like, all
Huh.
right, I know he's gonna be there. Let me just show up and see what
Yeah.
happens.
You make a good point. Like, and I can't say where that comes from in me. Like, I've just always had this impression that like people are great to meet and that people want to help me. And I do believe like however you view the world, like you end up like some people call it this like manifesting and like I don't believe you can manifest anything that God hasn't already created and destined for your life personally. But like for me, I just believe that people are great to meet, and I assume like if I'm going to go meet somebody, they're going to be meetable and fun and wanting to like help me out if I need help and I can help them, kind of like I was talking to you before the podcast. And so I guess it's just how I've always been. Like but sometimes you get an idea and it excites you or you want something and the best thing to do is just to go get it. Like I remember I had an apartment that I was living in and the apartment manager came through with the apartment owner, the guy who owned like all like 40 units in the apartment. And like they knocked on my door because they just were coming through the various places and they're like, hey, can we come in? And I was like, and just look at the quality of, your spot. And I was like, sure. As soon as I saw that he was in charge of like the whole thing, I was like, basically, I don't know you, but I've always wanted to know about owning an apartment building. Like, can we meet up? And he was like, here's my card. Come to downtown Seattle and I'll meet with you for 30 minutes, And like he probably just saw like this young black guy and he's like, I want to help him out, because he's like curious, but that curiosity, I think people respond to that. I think people, no matter how optimistic or pessimistic they might be, when they see somebody that's curious about learning and wants to advance and is just like willing to meet, they're willing to help out, and so hopefully that answered your question. I
No,
don't really have a solid answer. It's
and
been my
it's one of those things
experience.
that, like I said, I can't really. It's hard to find like really stem like that, like the root of it. Like so,
Yeah.
noticing that in you, and I know I have it in me. I wanted to hear what your thoughts were kind of on it. But you mentioned too about like just being young, a young black guy, right? Whatever, young in
Hmm.
general. I feel right. If you're young and hungry, like I feel the people who really got it in life, all the people who already made it, there's literally no much more money that will make them happy. So the only thing that they could do, right, is just
Yes.
pass the game on. I feel.
Yeah.
And so from what I found personally, it's very similar. I had a very similar experience. I know a lot of people talk about like getting scammed and screwed and stuff like that. And yeah, that happens out there. I'm not naive. I know bad things do happen out there. But like for me personally, I can only speak to my experience and
Hmm.
everything so far, it's been like people want to help you, especially when you go out of your way to get it. Right. If they're going out of their way, now that's another story. They don't want to help you. Right.
Right.
But if
Yeah.
you're going out of your way to be curious and learn and you're young and you're getting after it, you have such a leg up on like everybody, young and old. Because a lot of people, either they're young and not doing nothing, or they're older and they're not doing nothing, right? At least nothing big. And
Sure.
just like, to a lot of those people, as I said, that have made it, those people are just like willingly just like, hey, like, yeah, let's meet, or let's hop on a Zoom call, or now it's let's hop on a podcast and actually just,
Yeah.
get some sneaky one-on-one coaching, but it's a podcast. It's still a podcast interview, but like,
Yeah.
ask them everything I want to know. And it's like people see that, and it's I think hard work is a universal language, I feel. And no matter where you're at, I think everyone respects hard work for the
Mhm.
most part, because most people know that most people won't do the work. And to see someone doing
That's
it,
true.
right? It's like, and then add young on top of that. It's like, okay, all right, now you got some steam going. Now you're doing something. Like you said earlier, too jokingly, I know, but like you said, if you started when you were my age, right, you would have conquered the world by now, right? So it's like, I get that, or something similar, some variation of that, pretty often, and it's like, it always feels like great to know that I'm on the right track, because as you know, like everything
Mm.
always looks great on the outside when it comes to this entrepreneur space, especially this
Oh,
digital
for sure.
entrepreneur space. And so like I hear it and it's like, all right, I'm on the right track. It's always reassuring, because like, man, like the whole past 2 years been crazy, man. And like dropping out of college, trying to figure, I was working like 70 hours at one point, plus
Yeah.
studying for my real estate exam. And so it's like right after I dropped out, so it's like in the middle of a global pandemic, not knowing, whether or not I'm on the right track or not. I just seen the Alex Ramosi video too, on Instagram the other day. It was like, all right, the thing about entrepreneurship is like you'll never know whether or not you made the right call, and I think that
Mm.
that, that kills the dreams of a lot of people. That
Mm.
uncertainty, right? And I was like, man, that's true. Like, there's days I question, like, right now I would be a college graduate, if I not left, I would have graduated back last May. And it's like, well, now I'm also starting to finally catch my stride. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, at this point in time, I'm making about the same amount of money as a college graduate fresh out of college. So I was like, huh. But I also have 2 years of experience in the actual business world, meeting millionaires, meeting people like yourself, meeting people
Yes.
from all backgrounds, traveling the world, going to business conferences, right, for the
Yes.
past 2 years. So it's like, all right, very different trajectories. And I don't know, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent. It's like,
Keep
like I
going.
just want to, I wanted to circle back to what you said, because you mentioned some good stuff about like, um, about manifesting, and like how you can't manifest anything that God hasn't already destined for your life. And one of the things that I always believe that, and I heard this from Russell Brunson actually, but it's like you have to
Okay.
be a good steward of your ideas, right?
Yeah.
All these little ideas that you get, like, oh, let me start a lemonade stand, or oh, let me, sell some shoelaces or something like that. It's like, if you can't see God in the little things, right? You can't take advantage of the little blessings, right? That you get. How on earth are you going to be able to handle the big ideas when they come? And it's just
Right.
like, for me, like similar to you, like I tried a bunch of things, and when I get an idea, I go with it fast. I don't really do too much thinking, right? I just
Yeah.
throw myself into it, and it's just like, for better or for worse, not everything went well. And I don't think being a good steward of your ideas is about succeeding with those ideas, but it's about putting them into putting an honest effort into making it work and seeing what happens. Because usually, at least in my case, none of it worked so far until I stumbled across AI. And now I'm starting to finally catch my stride. I'm starting to get a little bit more,
Right.
get noticed a little bit more. I'm starting to finally make some money with this digital business, right? And it's
Yeah.
just like, but had I not, it all started with a $500 one. Well, technically, it started with me reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then I started going on YouTube University, and I bought a $500 course on wholesaling, and then I got my LLC, and then from there,
Whoa.
I was
Okay.
getting ready to get into real estate wholesaling. That ended up not working out. Attorney misinformed me, and then I was like, all right, screw that. Let me focus on real estate. And then I decided to drop out. And then I didn't sell any houses in real estate, but along the way, I started my podcast. And then 4 months into real estate, I got asked to teach a social media class, and I was doing, and everything just led up into one another.
Yeah.
And I tried everything, and so far, virtually all of them have failed, right? But I tried a lot of them, and it helped get me to where I'm at now. And
Well,
I think, yeah.
it's okay. I think you told me the age of the average listener, pretty young, which is awesome. And we can't be afraid of failure.
Mm-hmm.
Like I learned this phrase called fail forward.
Mm-hmm.
You fall over, like just like a baby who's learning how to walk. Like they don't fall down and then wonder, oh, is this like walking thing for me? Maybe I'm just not meant to walk. I see other people walking, or I guess everybody walking,
Yeah.
but maybe walking's not for me. I've fallen down. It's like, no, a baby will always get up. And like that's the thing. Like we got to embrace failure. Like the path to success is paved with failure. But to your point, like how would somebody know that unless they weren't around the right kind of people, like feeding
Yeah.
themselves with the right kind of books, you know? And I think like that's something we share where like, you know, I'm assuming you're well read and like
Yeah.
just devouring books. I mean, you talked about a book that like I have the same book where I looked over at my bookshelf. I'm like, yep, I got that book. And something I would share with a listener that served me well, that I was super fortunate to be told way early on, was that if you want to do something, uh, and you kind of want to know is it going to work out or what it could look like and what the outcome of that is, go find somebody who's done it for 10 years already, and then ask them about it. Because like a lot of times we want something, but what we really want is a lifestyle that we think that thing will get us, you know, like you mentioned wholesaling, you know, and for me, like I started with computers. It's like we want to do something, but really we want the lifestyle associated with it. And so like the shortcut, the hack is find somebody who already did it, then see if you enjoy their lifestyle. You might find out, oh, okay, being a doctor is not for me because I'm looking and they're just complaining about the long hours and all the insurance hassles and this and that, you know? And like, or maybe you wanted to go and sell, like, I don't know, sell jets. Like, I remember being fascinated with people that sold jets. I'm like, how could you sell private jets? But like, there's people that do it. But you talk to them and realize, oh, like the daily grind doesn't actually meet what I thought it would, that desire inside. And then yeah, that's all I wanted to share.
No.
John, how did you decide how I'm really curious when you made it to AI,
Yeah.
did you know or do you know like is this going to be it? Like the thing that you go big with or or was it just that it kind of hit you different and you were more excited about it or like how did you get to AI and stick with it?
So around December of last year, right? Or
Yeah.
2022, I found out about ChatGPT. So pretty early on, because it came out in like late November, and
Yeah.
so I started dabbling around with it just for show titles, right? So show titles and show notes, and then super simple stuff. I wasn't into prompt engineering or like any fancy AI strategy or whatever, whatever. I was like, hey, can you make a title for an episode? I talked to this guy about
Right.
this thing. Give me some ideas, right? Boom, and it usually come up with some stuff, and I had to tweak it a little bit, but then around that time, I was at a point where, as I said, I tried a lot of things. I was working at a restaurant. I was trying to be a real estate agent. I was trying to do social media classes. My podcast numbers were going down, and so it's like I wasn't making any money. Now it's wintertime again. Restaurant is super slow, and I was just like, man, like what am I gonna do? I already stopped focusing on real estate. I tried to turn this. I was teaching like social media classes, and I was
Mhm.
getting like hundreds of people to register for my classes, but like I never had any. It wasn't a business play for me. And then I tried to turn into a content creation agency. After my first client, I was like, "This sucks. Never doing this again." And then from there, I said my podcast numbers are going down, and I ended up finding a
Uh-oh.
Japanese concept called ikigai,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I started doing a lot of like pretty much reflecting, and I was like, you know what? Let me go all in on my podcast. And so between like late December of 2022 and like March, April of 2023, I probably hopped on like a little over 100 shows. I was hopping on podcasts literally back to back to back to back almost some days. And
100 shows.
yeah, I was going
That
nuts.
is
Yeah.
ultra impressive. I don't know if like the person listening can respect that. That represents a lot of hustle too. Because if you hopped on 100 shows, how
Yeah.
many people did you contact in order to
Yeah.
get 100 to say yes?
And then on top of that, I still had my show that I was doing, that I was
Yeah.
still recording. And at that point in time, I was doing like 2 to 3 episodes a week, for my own
Wow.
show, right? Plus all the
Yeah.
other interviews and stuff. But long story short, I say that to say that I met this guy named Jason. He had a mastermind. Me and him hit it
Mhm.
off after I hopped on his podcast. Then we hopped on another call, and he was like, "Hey, like I would love for you to join. Like, stop by a call this Friday's call. Stop by the call, and I love what he had going on, right? And I've connected with him same way we connected. And he was like, yeah, if you'd like, I want to offer you, a deal to hop in a mastermind. And I was like, all right, how much is it? Then he gives me the magic
Yeah.
number, right? How much is it?
Yeah.
Is like the question, like you always want to know. Um, and and like 400 a month. At least that's what it was at that time. And I
That's
was like,
it?
Yeah, no, but listen, I was like, month one, I'm like, all right, I got it. Month two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10. I was like, man, I don't know where I'm gonna find these $400. Like I said, at that
Okay.
point in time, I still wasn't making no money. Haven't sold a house. The social media agency thing didn't work out. Podcasting is monetized. I was like, man, I don't know how I'm gonna do that. That's like a whole car note. And I was like, maybe the reason I don't have any money is because I'm playing scared with my money to begin with. And so
Mm.
I was like, all right, let me do it. Boom. So I
Okay.
invested in a mastermind. In the mastermind, he had a course on how to use ChatGPT. I don't remember anything I learned in that course. The only thing I remember is that at the end of it, he screen recorded himself using ChatGPT to make the very same course I just watched. And that's when I was like, bro, ain't no way
Hmm.
he just it's like a magician doing a magic trick, and like right after he was like, all right, so here's how I did it, right? And it's like, so that's how it like, oh, so that's how
Yep.
it's it's done. And at that time I said, remember, I was just using it for show notes and like show descriptions. So I was like, I wasn't using anything fancy at all.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'm gonna teach a class on how to use ChatGPT. I use a ChatGPT to create the webinar presentation, like outline. I used to create
Mm.
the information that I was going to put on each slide. I use one app called Tome.app to
Yeah.
create the actual presentation slides. Dali and Midjourney to create the images. I had
There you
ChatGPT
go.
create the Eventbrite landing page information
Yep.
on
Yep.
Eventbrite. I use Midjourney to create the event background, like event photo and a flyer, stuff like that. I use ChatGPT for the email to get people to register, email
Yeah.
to get people to remind them to show up. I had like 300 people to register at the end of it. First time ever, I said, "Hey, I'm doing a workshop. This is a Wednesday. I teach the webinar. I was like, "Hey, I'm doing a workshop on Friday for 2 hours to go deeper into this stuff. It's 197. It's 20 spots within 24 hours. All spots sold out. I made like
Yes.
4,000 in that 1 hour off a class that AI did most of the work for, and that was
Yes.
about 3.5 months of me working at the restaurant job. And
How did
that's
that
when
feel
bro, I felt
when you're
like
looking?
I felt like dumb. One, because I feel like I've been playing the game wrong forever. Like
Okay.
I could
All
have been
right.
making money. My first class had 440 people sign up for it, right? And every class from then on had, like I said, the least amount of registrations I've ever gotten for a class is like two something. Um,
Wow.
and so it's like I could have been making money teaching the free classes, but I was fighting with two things. One, I never did it to do like turn into a business. I was actually teach a class on social media just because I was a third of the age of most people. I was in a couple
Okay.
like free real estate communities, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh, dope! This is gonna be my way of giving back to the community, get myself
Sure.
known, right? And start building referral partners, right? That's what I really wanted it for. But then like John, after my second class, one of my friends, she's a millionaire agent down in Maryland. She was like, John, never teach another one of these again for free. Like, what's your Venmo? What's your
Mhm.
Cash App? Like, put it in the chat. And then they were like, all like trying to peer pressure me into putting my Venmo so I could put it in the chat and they could pay me. But I was like, I felt so cringe because it was never for money. And
Right.
then I did the Chat GPT class and I was like, oh, I could keep teaching these free stuff. And then at the end, upsell something and like make a whole bunch of money. All the free
There you
people
go.
get the value. I get paid. And then the people who
Right.
want to go deeper, they get even more information and coaching. It's like
That's
everybody
okay. Yeah.
wins. And so that's
Yeah.
when I knew, like, all right, I got to go all into this AI stuff. And since
Yeah.
then, I started going crazy with AI.
Plus, I'm sure you saw that once you started charging, people took what you were saying more seriously, and you probably got more testimonials because when people have their own skin in the game, so to speak, like when they actually pay for something, they're more likely to follow through. If just because they're like, well, shoot, I just paid 197 for this, like I
Yeah.
better get my money's worth and actually learn, you know?
Yeah. People who
Yeah.
pay attention. And it's one thing it took me a while to learn. But it's like by not charging people, you're doing them a disservice. It's just like if you really want to help somebody, you have to charge them. Like it is like your moral obligation to charge people
Yeah.
so that
Yep.
they take it seriously, not for you, but for themselves, right? Or else
Hmm.
it's gonna be almost impossible to like actually transform them. Like you can give
Yeah.
free information all the time, but if you actually want to make a transformation, from what I found, like you have to charge people.
Yeah. Don't, I just, you feel like giving free information really helps, and then that person DMs you and you have like this, I don't know, over the course of like 5 days, maybe hour and a half of like DMing back and forth, and you're like, yeah, I'm doing good, I'm helping them, but it's like actually you're not. Like the
Yeah,
quicker you drop a link and say, you know what, I want to help you, but come on this consultation call because I'm busy, and it's, $2.97 an hour or whatever. And then I can help you. Like, I've helped so many people for free, only to like check up on them later on, month down the line. And it's like, oh yeah, well, I decided to go this different way. Or, oh yeah, I just feel like, in the Christian world, they'll be like, oh, I feel like God had something else for me. And I'm like,
Yo,
yeah, God
oh
had
my
work for you. You didn't want to work. And so then you went to something else,
Yo, on that note, man, I want to mention something. I feel like so many things. So like, man, I'm Christian as well. And it's like, man, like the amount of Christians that just live life in fear is like, for me personally,
Mm,
is I can't come to understand it. Because like for me personally, as I said, like being a Christian, like believing in a God that created all this that we have here in front of us, right, in
yeah,
6 days, right, and
yeah.
everything that's here that's amazing and wonderful was made by Him. It's like, and I know that He has the best, the best plan for me. Like He's not out to get me or sabotage me. He wants the best for me. He wants me to be safe and be loved and prosper, right. And it's like there's so many quotes in the Bible, verses in the
Mhm,
Bible, right, that just
mhm,
talk
mhm,
about like how like we're meant for more, and like
mhm,
how He has our back, and like you know um and it's just like for me, like it's not that I'm not scared or have no fear, right, because that's a human like it's part of the human experience, I
yeah,
feel.
yeah.
But it's just like it's about courage, and I feel like there's so many Christians who are just have no courage. And it's like for me it's like, how do you have faith in Him but not don't live out your life as a such. And this is not to come off of a place of me judging anybody. It's
Mhm,
just me trying to come to a genuine understanding, because it's like how it's almost contradicting to believe in a God that powerful, that as I said, where there's plenty of evidence that says like He has our backs, and it's like a lot of people don't take action at all, and they just live in fear, they live in mediocrity. And
yeah.
for me, I refuse to get to the end of my time and be like, oh, well, left a lot on the table, left a lot of gas in the tank, right?
Right,
Like, well,
right.
I could have done this, and that, and but now it's all over. It's all said and done, and I don't know. I wouldn't know how to live with myself if I knew that like I completely fell short of what I could have been.
Yeah. It's like the years seem long, but there's this saying like, the years go by faster. It's like a roll of toilet paper. The closer to the end you get, the faster it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, you get to the we just don't want to arrive at the end of our life. Like you just said it. You said it so well. You don't want to arrive to the end of your life seeing all that you could have been, and then it's like over. As far as I believe, we only get one shot.
Yeah.
So it's like, why not go for it? And the fear is there, and sometimes the fear. I mean, let's be honest. Like sometimes it's crippling. Like
Mm-hmm.
for like you understand the entrepreneurial struggle. It sounds good. It sounds good on the podcast. It sounds good when you're interviewed, but then like let's talk about how maybe at the day job like I got upset when I put in overtime and worked like 60 hours a week. Let's talk about how I left that behind, but then I know what it's like to have worked 90 hours a week, but then and be broke and or like put in like many 90-hour weeks not to see the results yet. And then
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh shoot." Like, but I have to eat or like I have to pay the electricity bill or my car insurance bill. Like, like that's the journey that like every entrepreneur can relate to. Hopefully it never got that bad for you. I'm just speaking from my experience like at
Yeah.
certain times. So but it's exciting. It's exciting.
There's a saying like and I heard this from Alex Hermosi. He was like, one
Mhm.
can't wish for a strong character and an easy life because the price of one is the other.
One can't wish for, say that again
Yeah,
because I
so
need to get it, which means the listener needs to hear that again too. Say that one more time.
one can't wish for an easy life, both an easy life and strong character, because the price of one is the other.
Ah, the price of easy life is strong character, and the price of strong character is an easy life.
Yeah, so it's either you have one or the other. You can't have both, right? If you have an
Mm.
easy life, you'll never build strong character, right? Strong character is built in, in the, in the thick of it, in the when everything's
Yeah,
going bad, in the tough times. And so to have an easy life, you're giving up having strong character, right? And it's just
yeah,
like you can't take one without the other type of thing. And it's like I think a lot of people want it easy without the hard work, and I feel like a lot of younger people feel entitled to an easy life, with all their first world problems, I like to call them. It's like, you know,
Yes.
they feel entitled. It's like, man, go put in some work. Like, you don't know what struggle is. You don't. Most people don't know what real hunger is, right? Like for
Oh
me,
yeah, for sure.
I fasted for like my longest fast was like 42 hours. But even still, there's people who like fast longer than that. It's like people don't know what true hunger is. I mean, I was like really hungry, but like even still, there's people that go longer than that. And then on
And you
top of
could go
that,
to the fridge,
yeah,
right? It was a
exactly.
willful fast. It wasn't like a fast like you're refugee or you're trekking across the, somewhere and you didn't know where food was going to come from next.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
man. It's just like that's one of those things that, man, it just sticks to me. Just like, the hard work just need doing, and it's like you have to, this entrepreneur. As you mentioned, like a lot of good points that I resonate so much with this entrepreneur stuff, and just like, it's just sucking for so long, and like, bro, it sucked for so long, but it's like, well, it's the lesser of two evils because I'd rather be a slave to the system than, so I guess broke and hard work is my only option for now until I finally figure this
Right.
out. Thank God that after 2 years, like two, yeah, I started catching my stride like mid last year. So after 2.5 years in, because
Yeah.
I started at real estate September 2021. So 3 years really. It took me about like almost 3 years before I finally just started to, caught my break. Right. And a lot of people don't see what went on in that 3 years. People had to stop talking to, and not because like I wanted to, or not because I cut them off or we got into an argument, but just because like your path just starts to diverge. And it's like, then you realize that most people you were only friends with because you seen them. It was
Mm.
convenient to be friends. And then as you start going on your journey, and it's like, well, we talk about my memories and that's great and all, but like, what you got cooking up? Like, what you working on this year? Where you going
Mm.
this year, man? Like, let's talk some big stuff, like some big dreams, like big
Yeah.
everything. And it's like you don't have to be there, but it's like where your headspace at, and what books are you reading? That's what I wanted to mention. You mentioned about books and people, right? There's a quote. It's
Okay.
like, the man who's illiterate or chooses not to read only lives one life, while the man who reads lives many. And so it's like
Oh, okay.
you lit, and so that's one thing. So I haven't read that many books, right? But I listen to tons of podcasts and YouTube videos. So it's like I'm always consuming information, right? In some way,
Yeah.
shape, or form. And it's like, and then on top of that, traveling, and you just get so much more perspective, so much better outlook on life, and you're able to navigate the world better when you have all these different viewpoints and perspectives from people you agree with, and like what you said when you were in France, people that you completely disagree with and had completely different viewpoints and morals, right?
Hmm.
And still be able
Hmm.
to be friends with those people. And one thing that I think I got from Jordan Peterson, I think, or something about like how you have. I don't think it was Jordan Peterson. I don't want to misquote him, but it was something like how you have more in common with like Hitler and Joe Stalin and all these people that are claimed to be evil
Okay.
more than you realize, because we all have a shadow, and under the right
Okay.
circumstances, right, we're
Yeah.
them. Right. If we grew up in the same situation they grew up in and had the same exact experiences they did, 9 times out of 10, we end up the same exact way they did. And when you realize that all humans have this capacity for evil, a lot of people try to hide it and tuck it away, but it's like, no, you have to embrace it. And another quote I love, let's just keep spitballing quotes. It's like, but it goes with the flow of things. It's like it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener at war, right?
Huh.
And
Okay.
so,
All right.
like, you have to embrace that, like that evil, that monster, that shadow in you, and then learn how to keep it under control. That way, if it ever does show up, you don't go on a rampage and accidentally, black on the people that you love and start, yelling and calling people out their name and stuff like that. It's like, no, control that. So it's always kept in check. And so it's like, I don't even know where I was going with that tangent, but yeah, you know what I'm
I don't
getting
know either. That's
at.
okay though. Like I agree with you though. Like we all have that dark side, and like for me, that's like I don't think I understood like being a Christian, like salvation, so to speak,
Hmm.
until I really, like you said, not quite embraced that dark side, but realized I have this part of me which is just wrong, and it's like I could try to deal with it mentally by like reading this book, you know. I could try to say, "Oh, I'm not going to do this thing," but like ultimately that whole self-denial, I'll become a better person through like my whole actions, like it just didn't work, you know? And so like going to Christ and being like, "All right, through faith, I believe that because of what Jesus did, this part of me, like number one, I had no rights on having like a relationship with the creator as far as like my actions were concerned. Done for. Like he had every right as a holy God to be done with me, yet he still gave his life to pay the price that only he could pay. But he didn't have to for my
Mm.
sin. And it's like, and I can take that to him and be like, God, change my heart because like this book's not doing it. Like me going and like doing these like cerebral things aren't doing it, you know, and I still got this stuff. And then through time and through like just like we're hanging around and like jiving, you know, like but you get to hang around with the creator and then like his nature starts to like become a bit of yours, so
Mm.
to speak. Like that's that to me that's an awesome exchange and it takes away the darkness completely. So like
Yeah.
I love it.
I wanna.
You had said something,
Mhm.
and now I forgot what it was that made me think of it. But maybe to come back up.
I was gonna say too, to your point, man. It's good to find other people who also believe. You'll get into this entrepreneurship space, and for anyone that's listening, like, and whether you're a believer or not, but for those that are, it's like a lot of people are successful, and a lot of people have a lot of money. A lot of people
Mhm,
have the time freedom that you may be looking for, and the location freedom, right, and a financial freedom that you may be looking for, and not a lot of them are always Christian. And so
mhm.
then you always like, so I started going back to church this year, and not
Oh, cool.
this year, but
Right on.
I've been going to church on and off since like I used to go a lot more back like in third grade, up and through middle
Yeah.
school. Then went to college. Then the pandemic happened and kind of fell off, and then it kind of started coming back last year. And because like you get into these rooms, all these people that say all these things, like, well, where's that stemming from? Is that of God? And then it's like, well, it seems like they have good advice because clearly they're successful. They're on stages, they're speaking,
Sure.
they got everything. But it's like, all right, well, is that the success I'm looking for? Because if it's
Yeah.
not of God, then it's like I'll pass. But it's like it's hard to discern, what's what and who's what when you don't have that good of a relationship yourself. So like I had to start getting back right. So that as I start growing, I start getting these bigger rooms, I start getting in these, private masterminds and all these stuff, and it's like, well, I could start being able to weed out like, all right, who's, you know, uh, and that's not to say I can't be friends with some of these people, but as I said, it's like there's a verse I love. It's do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character.
There you
Right.
go. There you go.
And so it's like not to say that they're bad people or bad anything, but it's like it's not of God. And me being someone
Okay.
of God, it's like I got to make sure that at least the people I like closest to me are. And that's not to say I can't be friends with someone who's not. It's just that people close to me, you got to be tapped in. You got to be
Yeah.
tapped in.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, man, we could talk forever, man.
I feel like we could. Like we
like,
just connected, but now I can tell like oh that's why we connected in the
yeah.
beginning. Like um
So, Quadro, man, where can we find you at, man? Where can we connect with you? Where can we learn more about what you have going on? Cause like, yo, we
okay.
got to get more of you, man.
No, because I'm laughing because this is like the kind of episode that I'm going to start a new segment on my podcast where business, because my podcast is the art of online business, first of all, to answer your question, like where somebody could get in touch with me. Like if you want to hear more from me about online business tips and tricks and strategies to scale your online business, so you can scale up your income and your impact and scale down or lower your overwhelm, and your burnout, then just go to the artofonlinebusiness.com or just look it up on Apple Podcasts, also the art of online business on YouTube. But I was saying the reason I was laughing, John, is because I'm actually maybe 2 weeks away from starting a segment like this where we're not just talking like, oh, hey, how's it going? Like, share your business expertise and the episode's done, but like, business is the backdrop and we're more just connecting because like, I miss like just human connection
Yeah.
being here behind a screen, working all day, as a Facebook ads manager. And so
Yeah.
It's like I told you before the call, like you want to meet people,
Yeah.
I'll introduce you. And for me, I'm meeting more people. So yeah, that's where you can find out more about me.
Amazing, man. And so now it's time for our famous 5 questions, rapid fire round. We're gonna have
Okay,
some quick, heavy hitting questions for you. Make you think a little bit, but it's rapid fire, so you gotta whatever first comes to mind. So,
go with the gut. All
all
right,
right.
let's do it.
First question: what is the most impactful lesson you've learned in life?
Ah, geez. If at first you don't succeed, try again. It's a cliche, but it's what I've lived.
What is the most admirable trait a person can have?
Ah, can I do two?
Sure, give us two.
The most admirable trait, I believe, is optimism. One, because we're not in fact, we're guaranteed that we will experience adversity, and usually, like, it's that optimism that sees you through. Second most admirable trait that I value, that I see somebody could have, is just consistency. Like, if you're optimistic, if you choose to exercise faith, but then if you're consistent in like what you're trying, what you're striving for, like you get it, you can have it. Like, you can't be denied. So those two together.
If you had to change someone's life but only had one book, which book would you recommend?
I mean, oh geez, I'm looking at my bookshelf. You know, other than the Bible, um, I'm looking at this book called The Coaching Habit, I think. Yeah, I'm looking at this book. It's a blue and yellow book called The Coaching Habit by, hold on a second. Dang it, I grabbed the wrong book.
The Coaching Habit, rapid fire round.
Coaching Habit, the rapid fire round. But basically, I would recommend this book because it teaches you how to think, like through coaching. But like before I encountered a book like this, I didn't understand that, like, oh, if I'm behaving a certain way, it's probably because there's like a feeling and a thought behind that. And in books like this, they teach you about like something like called a thought model, where you have a feeling that produces a thought. I might be getting it reversed. That produces an action, and that produces a result. And if you want a different result, then you need to think differently about the situations that you've been experiencing. And for me, as a Christian, I've always heard the scripture like about renewing our minds. But I never understood that so much. I was like, oh, I'm going to think about like more scripture in the Bible and stuff. But like, then I realized, oh, renewing your mind has to do with whatever situation you're experiencing, like thoughts go along with that. If you start inserting different thoughts into this loop, then you get different feeling and action and different results. And so, like, a book like this, rapid fire,
Okay.
let's go.
Oh, what is the legacy that you're looking to leave behind?
Very simply, I think that the world should be traveled. And more importantly, specifically, I do think that other cultures and other people should be like just experienced, communicated with. And so, although I am an online business owner and definitely focus on this online business niche, the bigger legacy, and definitely something I try to instill in my kids, is like to meet new people, to communicate with new people, because I look out into the world and I see a lot of issues, and most of those issues, not all, but many of them, just come from misunderstanding of the other side, and a lack of willingness to go meet people who believe utterly different things from what you do believe. And so that's the kind of legacy I want to be leave behind: one of connection, one of communication, one of embracing people
And
who
then,
have just different backgrounds from yours.
final question for anyone that wants to embark on their walk to wealth today, what is the first
Hmm.
step you recommend they take?
I'm going to go with what you did, mastermind. That's a very quick and easy step. Like, if you have the money, get around, go find a mastermind that contains people that have the thing that you want, either the kind of business, the kind of lifestyle, whatever. And maybe mastermind, because that word just means the exchange of ideas. Maybe the mastermind, at least in the Christian world, is just a small group of people who have the kind of faith that you want. go get in that group of people, and you just will accelerate toward whatever you're trying to accelerate for.
100%, man. No, that's all for this episode. Thank you again, brothers, for hopping on, for having this conversation
Yeah,
with me.
you're welcome.
Excited to hop on your podcast and continue the conversation. Super excited to just
Yes.
stay in touch overall and continue
Yes.
collaborating this year, man.
Thanks for having me. Take care, John.